A lot of talk about this AI bubble. I talked about it in my AI newsletter yesterday. And one of my friends and your friends is Cuppy, who, if you don't follow him. He's great. He's very smart. I had him on a podcast a couple of times. But he's going off on like the AI bubble and Jensen says $4 trillion in spending is going to happen to 2030. And he's like, where's the ROI in this stuff? And I would love to have a debate with him on this because, first of all, if you're talking bubble, when you first talk bubble, it means that usually things are going to go a lot freaking higher, right, before the bubble pops. And let's talk about how bubbles are formed. Bubbles are formed when you have this irrational exuberance, you have this massive demand that everyone's like, I got to get in, right? And these create massive more supply. So supply it's happened, across every single tech industry, sectors. It happened during the dot-com boom, right? You have all these companies, everyone tries to take advantage of that trend. And then demand outstrips supply, and then you see this massive crash and the bubble bursts. Supply is not outpacing demand here, okay? They're still building data centers. The amount of money that these hyperscalers are spending, every single week goes by, we highlight the deals. Meta, Blue Owl Capital, building a $27 billion data center in Louisiana. Blue Owl's going to own 80%. Meta's going to own 20%. They're going to oversee the construction and property, and it's going to be built by 2030. Just constantly seeing like these announcements. I like that Microsoft's actually partnering with people, more people getting involved, this, private equity or whatever. People are like, how could they spend that much money and you're not generating a return? Let me tell you something. If you want to see the ROI, and I don't know where this argument comes from, if you really want to see the ROI, look at the next 10 days, because that's when you have Microsoft, Meta, Amazon, Oracle, Google going to report. Okay, and I want you to pay attention to their margins. I want you to pay attention to their growth across all sectors, every single sector. Okay, whether it's AI, infrastructure, cloud, whatever it is, you're seeing massive growth across every single layer of their businesses. Okay, these are $1 trillion businesses, and most of them are trading below 30 times forward earnings, which is insane. So you're looking at banks. Wells cut 24% of its headcount. You're looking at Conoco, I think, that cut 20%. I forget which one of the...
It's a major oil company.
Oil company. I'm pretty sure it's Conoco. You're seeing what AI is doing, and they can't really say it publicly. Right, but you're seeing it because their productivity, their margins are going higher, and they're cutting costs while their stocks are at all-time highs, right? And they're able to have this productivity and this growth. And people wonder why Palantir is going through the roof and it keeps going higher and higher and higher. It might have pulled back a little bit here, but when you have companies that can come in and revamp your entire operation as a Fortune 500 company, and you could save 10%, 15%, it's a game changer. It's massive. I mean, if you save 5%, that's what the S&P 500 is expected to grow the next year. So if you can grow 5% just by cost cutting, and grow those earnings, you're matching the S&P 500, not mentioning any other part of your growth business. But when you see what AI is doing and how it's affected education and healthcare, getting more drugs to market, drug discovery, cures for these diseases now. The oil and gas industry, it's just there's so many applications across every industry. Education, how it's helping students, they see 25% more productivity. There's studies out there, right? And they love using it. They love using things like ChatGPT as a research engine. When you take everything as a whole in the ROI, I see it. I see it because I cover companies. I hear companies talking about it. Not every company. There's companies that should be trading where they are, and there's going to be little bubbles. But when you're looking at the main guys, the main players, listen to the conference calls. Listen to what they're saying. Will spending slow one day? Yes, but we have great contacts in the industry. Taiwan Semi is a leader, Daniel, here, that they produce all the chips. I say all the chips, but most of the chips for the AI. And they produce them for NVIDIA, they produce them for AMD, they produce them for Broadcom. And no one is showing signs of slowing down. You would see it in Taiwan Semi. You would see it in a lot of people that we talk to that help build these data centers for hyperscalers. And you're not seeing the slowdown in spending. You're not. So as long as you're not seeing the slowdown in spending, you could say it's a bubble as well. For us, we're looking for new ideas within the energy landscape. We talked about that. We have some great ideas. Our last pick in Curzio AI is up 50% in a month. We have 2 stocks that are up over 400%, and the whole portfolio is up except for 1 stock. We just being in the right areas, you can make an absolute killing. Why? Real quick, last point. If you look at PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I think they might be the most conservative on this, AI, they say, is going to add $15.7 trillion. I have a chart of this. I'm going to show this. I'm going to bring this up if you're watching on YouTube. $15.7 trillion to global GDP. $15.7 trillion by 2030. As you as an investor and us as people that pick stocks, we want to find out who's going to take advantage, who's going to get a piece of that $15 trillion pie. And it's going to be a lot through energy, a lot through infrastructure. Maybe the chip makers, they had their run already. But, to call this a bubble, I don't see it. I think you're very early on. And, you have to make sure you understand this trend, not just looking at numbers. Because when you're seeing an industry, it impacts every single bite. Media across all advertisers. I mean, now you're getting things in social media, getting things in Best Buy, improving customer experience. You're getting things that you normally buy. They're not wasting your time. Wherever you see ads on these sites are usually for stuff that you buy, that you use. right? And people are going to pay an absolute fortune for that, right? So target marketing. I mean, there's just so many areas where this is working. I just don't see the bubble, and I love to debate them on that.
Yeah, and to your point, I like how you've been saying for a long time, it's not going to show up as a line item on your income or balance sheet. And investors and us retail guys have to understand that. And to your point, look for efficiencies and such. Both can be true is where I'm coming from. I have no doubt he is correct. He is a crazy smart guy. And Frank, there are, like you said, there's companies trading at valuations that shouldn't be trading there. There's companies that are spending a lot of money right now that will not, they'll just lose money. Whatever they're saying AI is going to do, it's going to flop. And that's not because they're bad or lying. That's because that's the world we live in. However, I think it's very incorrect to say AI in general is a bubble. You can point to small bubbles, as you said, Frank, but this is why, and we've talked about this for a while, whether you're right or wrong, you're not going to know this for a good amount of time because these things need to be built out, the data centers and such. But here's another key point. You have two of the biggest guys in the world right now. You have Zuckerberg, obviously, that runs Meta, big cat there, and then Altman, the guy that scares the crap out of me, that Bond villain look like, Frank. If you go back, you don't have to go back but to a couple years ago or even 2024. Frank, remember, Zuckerberg has talked about, hey, if we overspend by a couple $100 billion, not a big deal. And what they're essentially saying is the overspending risk, a bubble risk, is higher than underspending because of the impact and how AI is, what you just said, going to impact
that's coming
every
straight from
industry.
Yeah, he even said that.
And when you have, and again, I say this tongue in cheek because I'm still learning and I don't want to be condescending or act like I know it all. But when you have these two powerful men that are capable of raising, in Altman's case, and spending, in Zuckerberg's case, talking about openly saying, hey, I know people are worried. I understand there's a lot of money. NVIDIA Jensen says trillions are going to be invested. That's what, Cuppy said they were drunk on zeros. But the idea is these guys are telling you this isn't going to slow down anytime soon. And Frank is 100% right. At some point, somebody's going to cut CapEx. Somebody's going to do something. And the point is, as a retail investor, as an investor in general, if you're avoiding AI right now because it's going to be a bubble and there's going to be losers in this, I just think that's a big mistake. And you're going to watch markets rally until that point. Frank, you've talked about it a lot. The NASDAQ, you could talk bubble and then didn't it double like the last year before it really crashed?
From 1999
and I'm not saying it'll crash or double again. I'm just simply saying I think there's a lot more upside from right now until we find out whether AI is the Terminator or a flop.
Yeah, and Greenspan said irrational exuberance. I think it was in 96, 97. Okay, we didn't crash till 2000. So the markets went up tremendously since then, before that crash. And it doubled from 1999 to 2000, just the NASDAQ again. One thing I will say is Cuppy came on a while ago, was talking oil. Oil's pretty much out of favor, but this is when it was out of favor. This is probably like 4 or 5 years ago, and he was dead right. And I disagree with the thesis. I was like, wait, good job.
Oh, yeah.
But I will also say this. If you're going to call a bubble in the market, if you notice, a lot of people who call bubbles are people who have not participated in that market. You ever notice that? So if you look at Peter Schiff with Bitcoin, you look at Cuppy with AI, has not invested in this trend. When you're talking about someone that's engulfed in this trend, that invested in this trend, that's very fair, that has great contacts in this industry. Listen, if there's a bubble I see cutting spending, there's no pride. I'm not like, hey, you got to keep forward. Yeah. No, I've learned my lesson. There's no ego in investing. I mean, that'll destroy you. That will destroy you. And that's the thing. When you have a thesis on something and the facts change. The stocks are a piece of paper. They don't care. They don't care what you think. They don't care about your feelings, right? So if your thesis really changes on something, it's why I've been a wrap for such a long time, even though it had shitty performance for a while. Now it's doubled off its low. But the thesis has never changed. It's just they had trouble with management. They had a lot of missteps. And now how they're positioned is really, really good. I can't wait to get Scott on stage in the one conference. But, if the facts change, you got to, we had super micro in the portfolio and we were up a little bit and we were up a lot and it came down. I think we took a small gain on it, but the thesis has changed, right? So margins come down. They were competing against, Dell and they didn't have the margins there. So they were basically trying to beat on price and it was hurting, margins. I'm like, that's a problem, right? Your thesis has changed. So they're only seeing growth because they're lowering prices tremendously, which is not, a great thing. But when I look at people who call bubbles, a lot of times the people who call bubbles are people who've not been in that trend and have not made money in that trend. And that's why kind of like I don't really pay too much attention to them, even if they're friends or whatever. It's like, okay, if there's someone that's in this trend, if it's like a Dan Ives, it's a, of course Elon Musk is in there and he's going to say, if they're like, hey, there's a big bubble going on within this. Altman as well, I think might have said, some places. But overall, the hyperscalers are still spending. They're spending like crazy. You see news almost every freaking day that comes out, definitely every week, of these big data centers being built. You're seeing the profits. You're seeing the demand. You're seeing the technology excel. It's still there as agentic AI is going to be taking over for, large language models and stuff. And that's the next phase of this. Either way, if you think it's a bubble or not, look at who's going to benefit. I mean, you're looking at transmission lines that are 25 years old, $2 trillion in spending to replace some of this stuff. And that's from the utilities. If you're looking at energy in general, yes, you have nuclear stocks are doing good. We had a mirror on, but, short term, it's going to be solar. Holy cow. And that was a recommendation. My last recommendation is up 50% in solar, and we just recommend another solar company. I've been really digging deep in solar. Solar is now economical. I hate alternative energy because I lost money on so many investments in this area. Solar is the future. It is unbelievable how cheap it is. Make sure they have battery storage. That's AI, right? That means they're going to be focused on AI. That means they're participating in that trend. Hyperscalers need this energy because that's the easiest way and the quickest way, the most efficient way right now to get energy during the grid, to push some of that energy off so the grid doesn't go down. Right? That is what's being used right now in solar. And you're seeing these companies go through the roof despite the tax credits being taken out. And there's a lot of companies that are going to benefit. Not all solar companies, but man, the demand, the technology is there right now for this form of energy to meet that demand for AI. And that's one of the areas. So that's where you want to look. How do I benefit? And some other areas are going to be in bubbles, but still, I haven't seen anything that would say, hey, you know what, this AI trend's definitely over. No, we're not even close. I still think we're in the third, fourth inning here. We got more to go.